In a dark bedroom in a quiet suburb, police discovered two bodies, a mutilated woman and her teenage daughter. Blood splattered the floor and sheets, and a knife bearing their father's fingerprints lay nearby. Behind this horror lay a long simmering obsession within the family, culminating in a double murder. The Johnson family lived in a small town on the outskirts of Iowa. They had a two-bedroom house, a well-kept yard, a modest job for their mother at a local store, and a father who worked in construction. At first glance, they were an ordinary American family, unremarkable among their neighbors. They had a daughter, Emily, who was 16 years old at the time of the tragedy. She was a high school student, interested in music, kept a diary, and, like many of her peers, dreamed of leaving her hometown and going to college. Neighbors described the mother, Linda, as a calm and caring woman. She worked hard to support the family and rarely participated in social events, but she was always polite and friendly. The father, Robert Johnson, by contrast, came across as withdrawn and austere. He was 42 years old and had a history of alcohol problems. Although he had no criminal record, some neighbors recalled that he could be hot-tempered and aggressive. The peculiarities of their family life only became apparent years later. Robert displayed an excessive attachment to his daughter, which at first seemed like typical paternal concern. He inquired about her friends, demanding to know where she was going and who would be with her. But gradually, his control became obsessive. Emily complained to her friends that her father forbade her from dating boys, checked her phone, and sometimes had long conversations with her about how no one should know her better than he does. The mother tried to smooth things over, but sometimes expressed concern herself. Several times, she hinted to close friends that Robert was keeping too close an eye on his daughter, but nothing more was said. In a small town, such suspicions were rarely aired, and most dismissed it as simply strict parenting. Emily's school records contained no mention of violence, but teachers noted her withdrawal and fluctuating academic performance. Sometimes she would arrive at class tired and sleep-deprived. In her diary, which would later become crucial evidence at the investigation, Emily wrote that her father gets angry when she wants to go see her friends and that mom is silent because she's afraid of arguments. By early 2020, the situation at home had escalated. Robert began spending more time with his daughter than with his wife, leaving Linda feeling isolated. Arguments erupted. Her mother insisted Emily needed freedom, while her father claimed it was his way of protecting her. Neighbors heard screaming and hitting several times, but the police never responded to the calls. No one filed any formal complaints. At times, Robert could be overly affectionate with his daughter. Emily's friends recalled how he would pick her up at school and pointedly ignore her request to stay with her classmates. Emily once told a friend, "I wish I had a normal dad, not this one." These words would later take on special significance. From the outside, the Johnsons still appeared like a normal family. But tensions within their home were growing, and the first signs of a father's unhealthy attachment to his daughter were becoming increasingly apparent. It was on this foundation that the tragedy that would later shake the entire city would grow. By mid-2020, the Johnson family's relationship had completely changed. Robert became increasingly obsessive toward his daughter. His control went beyond the usual parental supervision and turned into constant pressure. He would demand Emily report every minute where she was and who she was talking to. If she stayed home from school for even half an hour, she would be yelled at and humiliated. Emily tried to protest. She argued with her father increasingly, explaining that she needed to interact with her peers, but Robert perceived her words as a threat. He was particularly irritated by the possibility of his daughter developing relationships with young men. A friend of Emily's would later testify to the following episode. Her father once kicked her schoolmate off the porch, declaring that no one has the right to approach his daughter. Linda's mother tried to intervene, but her efforts were ineffective. Robert pushed her away, insisting that only he knows what's best for the child. Their marriage grew increasingly distant. Loud arguments often erupted behind closed bedroom doors in the evenings, overheard by the neighbors. Linda insisted that their daughter attend school activities, but her father categorically forbade it. Eventually, he began making decisions entirely on his own. From that moment on, a tense atmosphere settled in the house. Emily lived under constant surveillance. Her father would check her personal belongings and read her phone messages. Several times, he eavesdropped on her conversations on the house phone and interrupted them. Friends noted that the girl began attending school parties and clubs less frequently. Emily's diary included entries like, "Dad says I shouldn't trust anyone, and he gets angry if I want to go out alone." The emotional pressure was accompanied by physical violence. Robert would raise his voice, push his daughter, and grab her hands during arguments. He would lock the door if he wanted her to stay home. Her mother watched this with alarm, but hesitated to call the police. A neighbor later told investigators that Linda once told her of her fear, "If I call the police, he'll completely lose it." Meanwhile, Robert began to exhibit signs of obsession that went beyond his fatherly role. He increasingly found excuses to stay close to his daughter, even in situations that seemed strange. In the evening, he would sit next to her and ask about her personal life, insisting that she share absolutely everything. Linda noticed this and tried to set boundaries several times, but Robert responded with aggression and accusations that his wife is destroying the family. Emily tried to seek support from teachers and friends. In one confidential conversation with her homeroom teacher, she said she didn't feel safe at home. However, her statement wasn't officially recorded, and the teacher merely advised her to talk to her mother. The situation became critical when Emily started dating a handsome guy from a different class. Robert found out and caused a scene. He made his daughter swear she wouldn't date him, and for several days he literally followed her to and from school. This became a point of tension for Emily. She confided in her friends that she wanted to run away from home, but didn't know where to go. At this time, Linda tried to persuade her husband to see a family therapist. She offered professional help, but Robert categorically refused. In his view, it was his wife and daughter who were distorting the family relationship, while he himself was acting as the protector. His words during one argument, "I won't let anyone take her away from me," would later be quoted in the case file. By the end of the year, the atmosphere at home had become unbearable. Emily avoided social interaction and became increasingly withdrawn. Linda considered divorce, but feared open confrontation. Robert, meanwhile, became completely fixated on his daughter, his jealousy and obsession becoming threatening. All these signs clearly pointed to impending tragedy, but neither her mother, teachers, nor friends were able to stop the events from unfolding. By early spring 2021, tensions in the Johnson household had reached breaking point. Over the course of several months, Emily increasingly told friends that she couldn't live with her father. She complained of constant monitoring and increasing aggression. Friends noted that the girl seemed depressed and frightened. At one point, she even admitted that she was considering leaving home forever. Linda, the mother, was trying to find a way out. She considered divorce and hoped to take her daughter back, but she knew this would provoke strong resistance from Robert. In conversations with a close friend, she shared her fears. "If I decide to leave, he might do something terrible." These words would later be quoted in court documents. March became especially critical when Emily started corresponding with a classmate. Robert accidentally saw the messages on her phone and caused a scene. He called his daughter a traitor, accused Linda of supporting debauchery, and threatened that he wouldn't allow the family to be destroyed. After this incident, Emily didn't leave her room for several days, and her mother tried to calm her down, but she herself lived in constant fear. Neighbors recalled hearing particularly loud screams coming from the Johnsons' house during those weeks. Several times, the neighbors considered calling the police, but Linda persuaded them not to, assuring them everything was under control. In reality, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. A few days before the tragedy, Emily attempted to go to a friend's house. She packed her things and called a classmate, but Robert spotted her at the door. A heated argument ensued between them. Her father snatched her bag, threw it on the floor, and demanded that his daughter stay home. Linda tried to intervene, but Robert shouted that no one has the right to destroy what belongs to them. On the night of the crime, according to the investigation, it all began with another argument. That evening, Emily refused to dine with the family and locked herself in her room. Robert followed her, and an argument ensued, soon joined by Linda. She sided with her daughter, telling her husband she had a right to privacy. These words were the last straw for him. There were no eyewitness accounts that night, but police pieced together the scene using circumstantial evidence. Around 10 p.m., neighbors heard thumping and a woman screams. The investigation determined that Robert first attacked his wife. During the confrontation, he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her several times in the chest and neck. Linda died at the scene. The father then turned to his daughter. Emily tried to escape, and traces of her blood were found in the hallway and on doorknobs. However, Robert caught up with her in the bedroom and fatally stabbed her. Investigators later noted that the scene of his daughter's murder, her own room, became symbolic of the tragedy. Her bed, school materials, and personal belongings were all covered in blood. Robert remained in the house for several hours afterward. It's unknown what he did during this time. According to police, he sat next to his daughter's body and then attempted to cover up the crime, but quickly abandoned the idea. The next morning, he called 911 and declared that the family is dead. Arriving officers found him in a state of severe emotional distress, but showed no signs of suicidal intent. The scene the police captured was horrific. The living room and bedroom were littered with evidence of a struggle, and the walls and furniture were stained with blood. Linda and Emily's bodies lay side by side, with a knife nearby. Robert didn't resist arrest, only repeating one phrase, "I didn't want to lose them." Thus, months of pressure, jealousy, and pathological attachment culminated in a brutal double murder within the walls of his own home. The events of that night became a turning point and launched a high-profile investigation that rocked the small town and soon captured the attention of the entire country. The morning after the murder began with a disturbing 911 call. Robert Johnson told the operator, "My family is dead." When the dispatcher asked what had happened, he responded incoherently, only repeating that he couldn't live like this anymore. Patrol officers and county crime scene investigators immediately responded to the scene. When officers entered the house, they were greeted by a scene that would later be described in reports as one of the most horrific in recent years. Linda and Emily's bodies lay in the hallway and bedroom. Bloody footprints stretched from the kitchen to the rooms, and broken pieces of furniture lay on the floor. A kitchen knife with Robert's fingerprints lay on the nightstand. He himself was sitting nearby, offering no resistance. The police's initial actions were standard: detaining the suspect, isolating the crime scene, and calling in forensic experts. Robert was taken to the station, where he was immediately placed in a holding cell. He remained silent and barely responded to the officers' questions. Forensic experts began examining the house. They documented evidence of a struggle between the spouses in the living room: an overturned chair, broken dishes, and blood stains on the wall. In the daughter's bedroom, they found evidence of an attempted escape: palm prints on the door frame and blood stains on the doorknob. All indications were that the victims had attempted to defend themselves. Investigators quickly concluded that the crime was domestic in nature, but the motive was unusual. During questioning, neighbors and family acquaintances described Robert's strange behavior toward his daughter. Some noted his jealous comments, prohibitions, and excessive attention. Emily's friends confirmed that she feared her father and dreamed of leaving home. Emily's diary, found among her belongings, took on particular significance. The teenager's entries included complaints of constant monitoring, threats, and even mention of fear for her life. One of her final entries sounded like a premonition: "Sometimes I think he might do something terrible." For the investigators, this became a direct indication of a possible motive: pathological obsession. The forensic examination determined that Linda died first. She suffered several stab wounds to the chest and neck. Emily was struck later, some of which were defensive. Characteristic cuts were found on her arms. The experts concluded that the girl tried to defend herself until the very end. During the official interrogation, Robert offered almost no coherent testimony. He repeated that he didn't wish anyone harm, but couldn't allow myself to lose my daughter. Sometimes he claimed to have acted in a state of passion. Sometimes he remained silent. The investigation referred him for a psychiatric evaluation. The city's public was shocked. Local newspapers ran headlines about a family tragedy and a double murder motivated by obsession. Journalists tried to uncover details about the family's personal life and interviewed neighbors, who admitted they had long noticed screaming and arguing, but never imagined it would end so violently. Police officially classified the crime as first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. The case involved 2 counts: the intentional murder of his wife and the intentional murder of his minor daughter. There was ample evidence of Robert's guilt: his fingerprints, his confession in the 911 call, expert reports, and witness testimony. At this stage, the investigation had completed the bulk of its work. Ahead lay the trial, which would determine Robert Johnson's punishment and provide a legal assessment of his condition and actions. Robert Johnson's trial began 8 months after the tragedy. During this time, investigators gathered all the necessary evidence: forensic examination results, psychiatric reports, Emily's diary entries, and the testimony of dozens of witnesses. At the preliminary hearing, the defense attempted to argue that the defendant was insane. The lawyers claimed that Robert was psychotic and unaware of his actions. However, a psychiatric examination revealed otherwise. He did indeed exhibit signs of a personality disorder, but these did not preclude conscious control over his actions. This conclusion proved crucial. At the main trial, the prosecutor laid out the crime in detail. Crime scene photographs, expert testimony about the nature of the injuries, and excerpts from Emily's diary were shown in court. The prosecutor emphasized that the murder was premeditated and the result of months of pressure and pathological obsession. Witnesses, neighbors, friends, and Emily's teachers spoke of her fear of screaming in the house, of her father's excessive control. This testimony painted a picture in the minds of the jury of a man who gradually turned his own family into hostages. Defense attorneys attempted to soften the impression, arguing that the defendant acted under severe emotional stress and did not premeditate the murder. But the facts conspired against him: the sequence of actions on the night of the tragedy and the presence of direct evidence of premeditation. During the trial, Robert made several statements. He repeated that he loved his daughter and didn't want to lose her, but these words evoked no sympathy. To the jury, they sounded more like confirmation of the obsession that led to tragedy. After a 3-week trial, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder of both family members. The court sentenced Robert Johnson to life imprisonment without parole. The public reaction to the verdict was unanimous. Newspapers wrote about the cruel, cage-like family, and television discussed domestic violence and control within families. Schools and social services in the district increased their attention to warning signs of troubled youth. For Linda's relatives and Emily's friends, the trial was a difficult ordeal. They acknowledged that the verdict wouldn't bring back the victims, but it would prevent similar incidents from happening again. The Johnson family story has remained etched in the local community's memory as a tragic example of the consequences of inaction and ignoring obvious signs of danger. The Johnson case became an example of how hidden obsession and domestic violence can end in tragedy. The father's life sentence did not erase the memory of the victims, and for society, the case became a reminder of the importance of recognizing dangerous signs within families.